The MM+M Media Summit returns to New York City on October 30th. Top voices in health media and pharma marketing will share what's working now and what's coming next. On the agenda, AI, retail media, personalization at scale, streaming, and the expanding definition of the point of care. We're talking strategy, consumer trust, and data privacy. What matters, what's moving, and what it means for you. Register at mmm-mediasummit.com. Use promo code PODCAST to save $100.
Like so many people, I didn't know much about hidradenitis suppurativa until a few years ago. I attended the Tribeca Film Festival to cover the debut of a docuseries produced by Novartis that delved into the lives of patients living with this chronic skin condition. HS is, by all accounts, a painful disease. An estimated 3 million Americans live with HS, which is most commonly identified by flare-ups as well as painful, unflattering lumps under the skin. Over the past few years, drug makers have launched campaigns and marketing efforts to bring greater awareness and understanding to the disease. In addition to Novartis' Silver Screen project, UCB has rolled out its Make History campaign to incorporate real patients, physicians, and influencers to underscore the impact of HS. UCB has also enlisted celebrity HCP and 2025 MM+M healthcare marketing influencer Sandra Lee, better known as Dr. Pimple Popper, to field questions from patients and boost HS awareness on social media. Another participant in marketing around HS is Incyte, which recently launched HS Truths. This is an educational campaign to shine a spotlight on the physical symptoms of the disease as well as the associated mental health challenges. Patient-led, HS Truths provides insights into how frustrating it can be to live with the disease before receiving a proper medical diagnosis, which occurs after an average of 7 to 10 years. This week, I'm pleased to be joined by Stephanie Atkins, Senior Director, Brand Lead, Product Strategy and Marketing at Incyte, to discuss HS Truths and how it serves to elevate the profile of HS as a disease state. And for our trend segment, we're talking about all things related to the continued splintering of vaccine policy uniformity in America under RFK Jr.'s leadership. I'm Managing Editor Jack O'Brien, and this is the MM+M Podcast. Stephanie, it's wonderful to have you on the show here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm doing great. I as we were saying before we kicked off the recording, I've covered a number of campaigns over the years that are focused on HS. And when I saw that Incyte was venturing into that same territory with HS Truths, immediately piqued my interest. Why don't we just start there? What is HS Truths?
So HS Truths is a campaign designed to drive awareness of hidradenitis suppurativa, which is a complex disease driven by immune system dysregulation, characterized by painful nodules and abscesses that can lead to irreversible tissue damage. And really, the focus of the campaign is to foster a greater understanding of the disease and to drive greater awareness of the realities of what it's like to live with HS.
And we'll get into all of that, but I want to talk just, the kind of blocking and tackling as it relates to the campaign. How did it all come together in terms of this is the approach we want to do? I know that it's patient-led, which is always very important whenever you're talking about something like HS, but, how did it actually go from conception to execution?
Yeah, so we knew we needed really to do something to drive more awareness of this condition. You'll often hear a lot of patient advocates say HS isn't rare, it's just rarely talked about. So not a lot of people know about HS, and even people living with HS, it takes many years to be diagnosed. So we knew we had an obligation to drive awareness of this condition, but how we do that is just as important as what we do, right? So we met with advocacy groups and recognized a few things that we wanted to do differently. One of which is we wanted to feature real patients. So not all of the campaigns actually feature real patients. Some campaigns feature actors. And we thought it was really important to feature real patients living with this condition. And one of the things when we spoke with patients, they said, don't just show our armpits. So if you know anything about HS, it occurs in different parts of the body where there are skin folds. So often the underarms, the groin, breast tissue, buttocks. So sensitive areas of the body. But we heard from patients show all areas that HS happens. It can really happen anywhere on the body. So they said, don't just feature us, but feature us as a whole person, showing our faces, and don't just show our underarms. So we really leaned into that aspect of the campaign from the visual component. And then obviously we wanted to share their stories as well.
I appreciate that too. And that's something too that reminds me of like different campaigns we've seen about, say, like eczema or other skin conditions where it's like it can show up in different parts of the body in different ways on different types of patients. And so it's important to be able to highlight that to get the greatest range of impact on your target audience. In terms of being able to have their stories, like how is that rolling out into the world? Like, are these testimonials that we're seeing from patients? Is that, I know that there are also like sometimes there's dedicated websites with blog posts. Like, how are you getting those stories out into the world?
Yeah, so we are focusing on those testimonials from patients on our website. We'll have an Instagram as well. So using a lot of social media, and then at conferences and events, making sure that we have their real voices, telling those stories and really highlighting the impact the disease has had on their lives.
And in talking with a host of different patients, what have you seen in terms of that impact? I remember when I saw that Novartis film a couple of years ago, what really stuck out to me is people saying like, I basically suffered in silence for years. And you talk about the armpit issue, but that was all across your body, wherever it's impacting your skin, is having, bloody episodes and feeling like you can't go out and be your fullest person. What was the sort of feedback that you got from patients in terms of doing all these testimonials and hearing their insights?
Yeah, I think it was, really eye-opening for me to hear how much this condition impacts their daily lives, and just the psychological impact it has on them. So as I mentioned, it takes about 7 to 10 years for a patient to get a diagnosis of this condition. And what's really disheartening is oftentimes they're misdiagnosed. So misdiagnosed with things like folliculitis, acne, boils. Sometimes they're told they have an STD because it appears in the groin. And so they're often also told that it's because of something they've done, their diet, their weight, their smoking, you name it. And so there's a lot of self-blame. And as a result, a lot of these patients will isolate, and they experience depression, anxiety, fear of going out to social events because they're afraid of the drainage that's associated with the condition. So the psychosocial impact it has on them is incredibly high. In fact, this condition has the highest suicide rate of any dermatologic condition. And so personally, I felt really compelled to make sure that we share their stories so that they are getting earlier diagnosis, but also that there's an urgency to treat and to drive awareness, just like we did with psoriasis, many, many years ago. A lot of people they're walking around with this condition and they don't even know they have it. So they're struggling to find a diagnosis, and I think we can do better.
I thought that was what intrigued me when I saw the pitch about the campaign, is the fact that it's just as much about what are some really well documented physical symptoms. It's also those mental aspects as well. And I'm sure that especially when you're competing against the likes of Novartis, UCB, being able to go out there and say, hey, like, we're trying to be an established, trusted brand, and you're focusing on that other aspect, I'm sure that that's got to move the patient populations that you're trying to interact with and engage with.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I don't think that we're competing with other companies as much, especially when you talk about disease awareness. I think adalimumab had an approval in 2015 for HS, but when you look at the rates of diagnosis, they haven't changed that much over the last 10 years, which is really disheartening to me. I think that, as new products are coming to market, hopefully there'll be more and more awareness. And the other thing about HS that's really unique is it's just such a complex disease, and it affects, all different types of cytokines. So what works for one patient might not work for another patient. And so really, I just think, like the saying, a rising tide raises all boats. I think all of these products coming to market will just be incredible for patients. And there's enough room for everyone. And I just really believe that we, as a pharmaceutical industry, are doing a great thing by driving more awareness and bringing new products to market so that patients don't have to suffer in silence anymore.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you being able to kind of give that nuanced take there. And I am curious about that too, because you bring up the fact that like there have been all these new products that are on the market, but the diagnostic angle really hasn't changed. Like where does that need to see improvement? Is that just better educating HCPs, or new technology needs to come to market, more patients being able to identify it themselves and bring it to their attention? Like how do we move the needle on that front?
Yeah, Jack, that's a great question. And it's one that we struggle with a lot because I don't think it's straightforward. So a lot of times these patients end up in emergency rooms, OBGYNs, primary care physicians. So there's an education that needs to happen there. But then there's also education even within the dermatology community. There are HS clinics and HS specialists who are really focused on treating this condition. And then there's the broader dermatology community who maybe doesn't see it as often. And those folks need education as well. I think we're trying to ensure that patients are referred to the appropriate dermatologist. And then from the patient side, I think the advocacy groups are, this is just a fierce group. They are incredible. They inspire me every day. And I think they're doing some great work too. So I think, from the patient side, helping them to understand that there are treatments available, that they are empowered to have a collaborative conversation with their dermatologist. And it's one of the things we did with this campaign. If you go to the website, there's a conversation guide for physicians actually to start to build trust with patients, because when they come in, when they finally get to a dermatologist, a lot of times they have lost trust in the healthcare system because it has taken so long. And so we're really trying to help dermatologists to be able to, or any healthcare provider, be able to have those conversations to build that trust with the community as well. So I think it's a multifaceted approach to answer your question, because we really do need to shorten that time to diagnosis. But once they get the diagnosis, we also have to help them to have access to the treatments that are available for them.
Yeah, I know. As so many things are in the healthcare industry, there's no silver bullet that's magically going to make everything better. It's going to take a lot of different stakeholders doing their part and being able to affect change in that way. I wanted to ask you too, in terms of just going back to the campaign and the marketing aspect, I think our audience is uniquely interested in that. I don't think I asked this at the top, just which agency that you worked with in terms of actually being able to bring this to life.
Yeah, we worked with FCB Health, which is an agency under the IPG network.
And in terms of bringing this out into the world, like how were they able to help you be able to say, like, this is the mission that we're going after, and this is how we're actually being able to translate that in an effective, practical way?
Yeah, we have a great partnership with our agency of record, and they really helped us to see this vision to life. They understood what we were trying to do, and I think together we were able to create the campaign using the photography. I think is really powerful. It's really simple. It's just a white background, and we are showing, like I said, the entire body to try to highlight that this can occur anywhere. I mean, it can occur on your face. We have a patient where we highlight the face and the back. And so we worked with an incredible photographer, and FCB Health really helped us to identify kind of the legs of this campaign, and that it can live on beyond just the initial launch, that there are a lot of ways in different directions we can take the campaign depending on what we need to do. As I mentioned, there's this angle with like emergency room, primary care, there's that education. We're not focused there currently right now, but not to say that we couldn't go in that direction if we need to.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing it be able to evolve in whatever ways the campaign needs to go and reach the most impactful people that it needs to. I'm curious too, like when you look at, and I appreciate what you said earlier, where it's like it really is a rising tide lifts all boats situation. It's not necessarily you competing with the other drug makers. It's like, how do we assemble our forces in our own unique ways to be able to address this patient population? Where do you want to see HS marketing go in the future? Like, where are there still those untapped opportunities or different ways to kind of change the paradigm around the disease?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, showing real patients is key and critical, and something we did here, and also moving beyond just the armpit, which I know can be a bit controversial in pharmaceutical marketing. But I think it's really, really important if we're going to educate both physicians and patients on where HS occurs on the body. We need to show areas other than just the armpit. And so I think that is something we did with this campaign intentionally and in a tasteful way. And I'm really proud of what we did. And we've gotten great feedback from both the patient community as well as the physician community. So that's something I would hope to see. And then I think we're seeing a lot across the variety of campaigns around earlier diagnosis. I think urgency to treat and treating earlier in HS is really important too, because if this disease is left untreated, there is irreversible tissue damage that occurs. And the only way to correct that is with surgery. And so we know if you treat earlier, you can hopefully prevent or delay the progression of the disease. So that's an area I think that needs more attention as well.
Yeah, I remember that from that docuseries a couple of years ago. I was just seeing, people that were in their late 30s, early 40s. And luckily they were getting treatment at that point, but had been suffering since they were like 10 or 11 years old. And it was, decades in at that point. It really makes you feel for the patients in that regard.
Yeah, it's such a debilitating condition. I mean, we have patients sharing stories that, it affects their, we talked a little bit about their psychosocial impact, but it affects even like their ability to move, to walk, to sit, to lift their child. Not to mention like intimacy. And there's a number of topics that I think, affect these patients that they might not necessarily feel comfortable bringing up to their dermatologist. But that's why I think if we have this multifaceted approach, we empower both patients and providers that they can treat this condition and to provide hope for the future. There are treatments available. There are more treatments coming out, and hopefully we can get these patients to a better quality of life, because ultimately I think that's what they all need and deserve.
No, and I appreciate you bringing up that point, because I was just covering a prostate cancer docuseries launched the other day, and they were talking about that too, where it's like, it's already difficult enough to talk to your doctor. There's stigmas around this disease state. And then you're talking about like, oh, it impacts my sex life in a negative way. And it's like, how do you even broach that conversation? So you're already dealing with one layer of stigma, add on another layer of taboo. It's like, it's a compounding issue all over again.
Yeah, we're trying to help bridge those conversations with the campaign. So as I mentioned, the conversation guide for the physicians, and we'll do similar types of work when we, on the patient side, when we launch that website, to help to bridge those conversations. We're also doing, a speaker program, a speaker series for, physicians as well, where we're trying to introduce topics that maybe dermatologists necessarily haven't always had to have those types of conversations with their patients. So we'll be diving into some of those topics, and we're holding hands closely with the advocacy groups and with the physician community as we build that content, because I think that partnership is critical.
Definitely. Well, Stephanie, it's been great having you on the show. I appreciate getting to see all the different aspects of the campaigns you're rolling it out. Going to be very interested to see when you launch that patient-focused aspect in the coming weeks and months. For those in our audience who may be interested, whether as a patient, caregiver, or just interested in the disease state itself, how can they learn more about the campaign?
Yeah, they can visit our website at hstruths.com to find out more about the campaign and to sign up for information.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, again, really appreciate the work that you and your organization are doing on this disease state. Look forward to having more follow-up conversations down the line about how it all progresses, but really appreciate you being on the show here.
Jack, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
AI is changing how we work, talk, and create. On November 13th in New York City, AI Deciphered, the next stage of your evolution, brings together the brands, platforms, and minds leading that shift. Presented by PR Week, Campaign US, and MM+M, this one-day summit breaks down what's working now and what's coming next. Hear how AI is reshaping media, marketing, and the retail experience, and find the tactics that fit your world. Register now at AIDecipheredSummit.com. Use promo code POD to save $100.
This is part of the broadcast where we talk about what's trending in the healthcare headlines of the day. And since we recorded last, there's been so much in terms of the RFK Jr. of it all. There was a contentious hearing at the Senate Finance Committee. There was the report on Friday from the Wall Street Journal that the HHS investigation into the cause of autism is supposedly going to try and link Tylenol usage among pregnant women to mental developmental issues down the line. Then there's the splintering that we're seeing in terms of vaccine mandates, coverage, access, state by state across the country. A lot of things that we can unpack there. Matt, I want to bring you in first because you were talking about it earlier. We're seeing that kind of splintering now in terms of what Florida's doing, in terms of what the Western states are doing. I know Massachusetts has a different approach to vaccine policy. What do you make of this kind of, I guess splintering is probably the best word to go about it, but we're seeing a fracturing in terms of vaccine access and policy?
I don't know. It looks to me like 1860 all over again. You've got the three states on the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, and California, all deciding that they're going to work together on vaccines. And then you've got Florida and the Deep South saying, you don't have to be vaccinated if you want to come to school, getting rid of mandates. So, that's no way to create national herd immunity, right? Which is kind of the point of vaccines. So we're fracturing, like yet again, another signal that, the country is fracturing, and the implications for health and for health policy are huge, and it's scary.
And you start off with something that used to be as uniform as vaccines. And now I think about it too, where it's like Texas is awaiting Governor Abbott to potentially sign into law where private citizens can sue others or companies around use of abortion pills too. So it's like, this is really the tip of the iceberg in terms of where other states can go in terms of their policy. I did want to add on too, you talked about that Western Health Alliance. Hawaii announced over the weekend that they're also going to join. So it does seem like this kind of thing where you could start to see momentum. I've seen Kathy Hochul in my home state of New York talking about how they're going to be modifying their approach to vaccines. I know that Maura Healey over in Massachusetts announced that they're going to be basically going by what the Massachusetts Department of Public Health is saying in terms of vaccines. And Lesha, I want to bring you in here because I don't think it's troubling, but it's probably more accurate, is Rochelle Walensky, who used to be the CDC director, had talked about how the agency basically has no, I don't want to say authority, but it doesn't have the same prestige and respect that it did before. And it kind of piggybacks off of what we talked about last week, where it's like, it's just an agency in disarray, one that had tried for years to really reestablish itself after some missteps during COVID.
Yeah, vaccine hesitancy has been increasing in the US over the years. COVID kind of created this very politicized environment around vaccines. And I think that's only increasing now, with Kennedy as HHS secretary. The CDC briefly under the Biden administration recognized that and attempted to invest in boosting trust among people when it comes to vaccines. We saw that with their wild to mild campaign that they rolled out during that time. But that's all kind of gone away now. And it seems that we're going to continue to see vaccine hesitancy increase. And I imagine that vaccination rates are going to continue to go down. What's interesting with all of this is that Trump actually came out and expressed support for vaccines, which I think kind of underlies this ongoing chaos / mixed messaging that we're seeing from the administration. It's unclear whether the Trump administration aligns with Kennedy's anti-vaccination goals. So it seems that Trump is supporting vaccines now, even though he's kind of flip-flopped on that as well. So I think that's kind of an interesting aspect of all of this as well.
And just kind of following up on that too, we had it last week. I think we were alluding to it in the episode where it was Trump going out there and saying the COVID vaccine makers have to prove the merits and the efficacy of their vaccines. And we got statements from Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax. And then Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, came out there and it was basically saying, look at all the studies, look at the efficacy that we've put out there over the past 5 years or so. And then said that Trump should be nominated for the Nobel Prize for his work in terms of advancing Operation Warp Speed. So there's this kind of aspect too that you talk about there, Lesha, where it's vaccines are a critical part of Trump's, some of the most accomplished things that Trump actually did in office was getting that across the finish line. And he's whoa. In terms of what RFK Jr. is trying to put out there, it's actually they are good. Obviously speaks to Trump being a germaphobe as well, but that's kind of an interesting development you talk about there. I'm curious too, Hire, we were talking about this when we were in the newsroom on Friday. We got this late breaking report from the Wall Street Journal that HHS was going to link essentially their study that they've been doing over the past, whatever it is, 4 or 5 months now, in terms of the cause of autism. They seem to have centered on this, what I think people can generally say conspiracy theory concept out there, that it's somehow linked to Tylenol. You and I were both there watching Kenvue stock drop precipitously. What was your reaction to seeing that pop up in the news?
Yeah, I think when it kind of broke on Friday that the story broke that there could be, the HHS might be working on a report like this. It just felt really jarring to kind of see something like acetaminophen being linked to it. And there have been so many news reports that have come out since Friday kind of really explaining that there just doesn't seem to be any sort of scientific link. And even, the former FDA commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, did an interview talking about, there have been recent studies even from 2024 or early 2025, showing that there's no link between acetaminophen and pregnant women taking it and developing, and their kids and children developing autism as well. And so it's been a kind of a whirlwind, kind of just seeing the stock drop as well, and just having people kind of react to things so swiftly. And a lot of folks in the medical community, especially those working with pregnant women, OBGYNs, American Medical Association, those working with maternal fetal medicine, defending acetaminophen and its use for pregnant women, specifically stating that, there has been no link necessarily that has ever been studied. And that's also another part when it comes to, I guess, like women's health, or, you're talking a little bit about some of the abortion stuff happening in Texas and other places. This is just like another thing that adds on to, if you are someone who's pregnant and thinking about that, a lot of misinformation around what you can and cannot take necessarily.
And I want to underscore that too. Kenvue, I reached out to them for a statement, and their spokesperson got back and said, we have continuously evaluated the science and continue to believe there is no causal link between acetaminophen use during pregnancy and autism. And then after RFK Jr. went out and said that the report from the Wall Street Journal was nothing more than speculation, they applauded him for that. So that's just to get Kenvue's side out there on the record. But you bring up an interesting point about misinformation. This also goes to what we're seeing in Florida that Madden was alluding to, that their Surgeon General was saying that they were basically going to try and upend all of their vaccine mandates. He did kind of walk that back in the conversation with Jake Tapper on Sunday on CNN. But Madden, I want to ask you a question, because you're somebody that has raised children. I'm sure that you were faced with plenty of misinformation in terms of actions that you could take for their health. And that was, years and years ago. Now in 2025, where there is this there is just so much misinformation that's out there. So many people telling you one thing or another. Like how do you even begin to navigate that from a parental perspective?
So I saw a pretty funny meme over the weekend. It was about doctors that people would trust more than they trust RFK. And, there are people saying I would trust Dr. Dre more than I would, Kennedy. Look, Kennedy's not a doctor. He's not even close to it. So it's all about, this is stuff that we report on all the time. You want to have a relationship with an HCP that you trust, right? And who knows you and knows your family. And, at least where I live in New Jersey, any doctor would say, like, yeah, you need to get these children vaccinated. And we did. And, there is, I believe the science. There's no causal link between any of the childhood vaccines and the schedules they're on and autism, or anything else. And, that's who I'm going to listen to. I'm going to listen to people who trust the science, not people who trust an influencer who may or may not be, receiving money from someone who, for whatever reason, thinks, that people shouldn't be taking vaccines or acetaminophen or anything else, even if there's this massive body of science that says there's no causal link between these things.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because that was one of the first things I said to Hira when we were reading through that Wall Street Journal report and then seeing Kenvue stock go down. It's like, for years and years, it was vaccines cause autism. That was based off that 1998 debunked study by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. And then you look at it now, it's like, well, no, it's actually Tylenol. It's like, at what point are you just a dog chasing its tail, trying to look for some sort of pie in the sky answer to something that is so complex, and we have better diagnostics now for autism? Like, there is just something where it's like, at what point are we just on a witch hunt trying to find an answer for something that doesn't have an easy answer in that sort of way?
Look, the nature of media is that people seek out media outlets that reinforce what they already believe, right? So if you are prone to believing that vaccines are harmful, you're going to seek out those media outlets, and you're not going to say, it's a rare person who's going to say, like, well, let me research both sides of this issue, right? So yeah, you're right. It's a dog chasing its tail. At some point, it's going to come down to, and this is nothing new when it comes to healthcare, right? When the public water supply fluoridation program started in the 50s, this started right away. There were skeptics about it, and there always have been. And it used to be that these people were kind of, considered, part of the tinfoil club. Like, you should line your baseball cap with tinfoil so that the alien rays don't get through. But now it's mainstream. So, and we have to deal with it. And so that makes our job all the more difficult, I think, and important.
Yeah, I would definitely underscore that point there. And I do think it's interesting that, as we talked about in the last episode, there is this larger pushback that I think we're seeing from public health officials, from HCPs, and now from even brands. The fact that we saw all three COVID vaccine manufacturers go out last week and have something to say about the narrower guidelines and the direction that RFK Jr. is taking it, to see, folks even on the Senate Finance Committee, which I still think largely supports him. I think the Republicans weren't necessarily that much more surprised. Here, you can correct me because you listened to a little bit of the hearing, but it didn't seem like anybody on that panel was calling for him to step down, but they were certainly raising more of their concerns than they had in January.
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of still kind of like just letting him kind of do his own thing, but just at the same time, really pressing on specifics around, his vaccine views, which I think he still largely defended and had kind of the same response that he did back in January and February when he was going through these congressional hearings. So, I mean, it's an interesting kind of situation in terms of, understanding lawmakers and their approach and trying to see what they're trying to balance for their citizens and populations. But yeah, I'm not really sure whether anything is going to change moving forward in terms of his position.
Yeah. And it's not like, I say this just in the interest of putting it out there for our audience, but NBC released a poll over the weekend that showed strong bipartisan support for adults supporting vaccines that runs counter to obviously this argument that I think you've heard from the MAHA movement and from Kennedy himself, that people have questions, people want safe, clean, whatever that means, vaccines. And, for the most part, people just want to have access to them. And I think we're going to be running headlong into something over the next month or two as we get into the respiratory season, where it's like, if people start to struggle to get access, there's going to be issues. That's just something I think people expect. Madden, you came back last week for your first week back here, and you're like, do they still do the flu shot here? Do they still give out like that free flu shot? That's something that I think a lot of people take for granted. And if that starts to get impeded this fall, I think you could start to see a little bit of hand wringing from the general public, maybe more than you saw for other stuff.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll just organize a bus trip to Ontario and get immunized. No, I don't think, again, we're this podcast is coming to you from being recorded in New York. And I don't think that any of us are going to, it might be a little bit more difficult, might require a little more hustle to get any of the vaccines that you typically get in the fall. But I don't think any of us are going to have a problem getting them. You have to pay for them now, which is, it's going to be different. But, again, it comes back to regionality, and that's concerning.
Definitely. And we saw it again. If we're relating this back to the abortion conversation, we saw it splinter back in 2022 when Roe got overturned. And, there's two different Americas in terms of your access to those sort of services. And potentially it could be going the same way for vaccines. It all remains to be seen. By the time that you listen to this podcast, there could be some other development, but we're giving you our insights as they come to us. So I appreciate everyone making the time to be able to have this conversation ahead of what's going to be a very busy week and busy couple of months here. So we'll all have to stay tuned for it. The MM+M podcast is produced by Bill Fitzpatrick, Gordon Thaler, Lesha Bushek, Ire Rickraj, and Jack O'Brien. Rate, review, and follow every episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out our website, mmm-online.com, for the top news stories on the pharmaceutical industry and medical marketing agencies.
The MM+M Media Summit returns to New York City on October 30th. Top voices in health media and pharma marketing will share what's working now and what's coming next. On the agenda, AI, retail media, personalization at scale, streaming, and the expanding definition of the point of care. We're talking strategy, consumer trust, and data privacy. What matters, what's moving, and what it means for you. Register at mmm-mediasummit.com. Use promo code PODCAST to save $100.